Hello everybody! Welcome back to my little corner of the internet where I will talk about stories of my life, my work both as a comic book author and a translator, my cats Hey Hey, who is here with me today, and Serengeti, and the occasional movie, book, or TV series review and recommendation, as well as some rants if the feeling hits. And today, today is rant time because I really want to talk about something that plagues every single action movie I have watched in the last decade. Every adventure movie, every horror movie, every science fiction movie, every movie where you have a main male character who happens to meet a female main character and it's not a romance. So let's talk about the dreaded, the terrible, the feared romantic plot tumor. Dun, dun, dun. Insert theme song here when I have one. First things first. Not every romance in every movie is a romantic plot tumor. There are movies where the whole point is romance, and well, of course, you want to see romance there. Don't go and watch, say, While You're Sleeping for the epic furniture making, or The Lake House for the theories on time travel. However, there are movies that do not need romance, should not have romance, and yet, there it is! Romance that not only takes away time for the more important issues of the plot, like, for example, saving the world, but sometimes is done so horribly that they completely pull you out from the story you were supposed to be enjoying. The fact that they also tend to be a very obvious no homo from the writers, well, that's the cherry on the shit sundae that is this particular trope that, for some reason, does not have a page on TV tropes. Let's talk about what makes a romantic plot tumor, and let's use 3 examples. One is the dreadfully bad Alone that I discussed in my latest More Chainsaws Needed. Other is the so bad it's average Avengers Age of Ultron. And for the end, the good until you realize based on a true story means we took the names of real people and did whatever we wanted with them, Patch Adams. Of course, these are not the only examples. I purposely left out the great subgenre that is tragedy and emergency are the best couple therapy ever, Jay, that plagues every single disaster movie. We may talk about those later on in a different video. Let your comments down below to let me know if you want it sooner rather than later. We will also talk a bit about those romantic plots that are not tumor to an action movie, but rather good enhancements. Because I really want to stress this. Not all romance is bad. And hey, if you ship anyone in the movies that I mentioned and write fanfic about them, more power to you. Be they canon couples or the crappiest ship to ever sail, you want to see romance in other plots. Again, go you. But I am talking about the actual canon writers, who sometimes seem to think that there is no way a man and a woman can have a 5-minute conversation without it somehow turning into true love forever and marriage bells before the movie is over, even if they have absolutely nothing in common. The first type of romantic plot tumor is the one where if you have a woman and a man in a movie, they will end up together. No matter if they only exchange a couple of sentences, no matter if she had a boyfriend or even has a boyfriend, let's be completely honest. If she is the obligatory romantic interest for the hero, which is to say, if the hero is a little interested in her, they are going to end up together, period. Alone is a good example of this, because in the first half of the movie, Aidan seems to have no interest in the outside world. He didn't even know who his neighbors were. But the second he gets a slight glimpse of Eve, who literally lives in the apartment right in front of his balcony, so he would have seen her before if he cared about looking outside his window, he suddenly decides he wants to leave and keep her safe and probably woo her before even exchanging one word with her. The worst part is that Eve falls into the same patterns without any preamble. I mean, yes, Aidan is attractive. he's Tyler Posey. And he has the very unhealthy habit of not wearing a t-shirt for most of the zombie apocalypse, and he's probably the last man on Earth that is not infected with the virus and all that. But she clings to him and to his voice with such strength that she would be called a toxic girlfriend in any other situation. At one point, he leaves his apartment to get food for both of them without telling her, and she berates him for not telling her before, for not considering her feelings, and for not acting as if they were a team. The problem is, we haven't seen her do anything that would imply that they are a team. She's just there as his muse, as his cheerleader. And even worse, we haven't seen anything that would imply that she needed him as much as he needed her, because the one time we see her in her apartment before she meets him, she's calmly sketching something as if the world had not ended in a zombie apocalypse. It's not until after he makes contact with her that she's suddenly afraid of all the noise outside her apartment and realizes that she might die of hunger and thirst, and this is day 43 of the zombie apocalypse. A little late to worry about, oh my god, I don't have enough bottled water. But what makes this an even more obvious tumor is that we don't know Eve. She is literally a blank that has no interests and no life before Aiden sees her. So by the time they exchange love declarations, it feels incredibly empty. And this emptiness, this absurdness, is made even worse because this comes right after we got this heartbreaking speech by Donald Sutherland character about how he saw his wife turn into a zombie and the love she had in her eyes for him turn into unending hate. There is no way to make this kind of plot tumor into a good thing. But if a romantic plot tumor is bad, when the female love interest is a blank page where anything can be projected into, it's even worse when we actually know the woman in question, when she has a personality and a story, and the romance is so forced that even the actors cannot make it look natural. Enter Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. In the first movies we see Natasha, which are Iron Man 2, Avengers, and Captain America the Winter Soldier. That is presented as a very strong woman who, while is willing to risk getting the Hulk from his self-imposed exile in order to have a strong team to get Clint Barton back from Loki, there is not a single hint of a romantic plot for her in the 3 movies. While undercover as his assistant, she flirts with Tony, but once her cover is done with, she couldn't care less for him as anything else than a possible team member. It is possible to imagine a romantic relationship between her and Clint, but that's on the viewers. It's a fantasy that could or could not be real and was, well, just in Avengers Age of Ultron. If it had been canon, it wouldn't have been a romantic plot tumor, as it would have helped advance the story. It would have made the one woman in the team be the only one with a romantic motive in Avengers, which has its own issues, but it would not have been a romantic plot tumor, which is our subject right now. And in any case, it didn't happen. Nat and Clint in the MCU are strictly friends. Longtime readers of Marvel Comics kind of hoped for something between her and Bucky in Winter Soldier. Hey, she's not a shipper. Or maybe between her and Steve, but neither happened either. Nat was still a single woman with no romantic interests, which again, very, very rare. The romantic interests in the Marvel Universe were strictly for the heroes, for the male heroes. Steve had Sharon and Peggy. Well, the less we talk about Sharon, the better, because it becomes a little bit icky, but he still had Peggy. Tony had Pepper, even if Pepper in the comic books ends up marrying Happy. Clint has his wife, and Bruce has Betty Ross, although she tends to be forgotten. Oh yes, and Thor had Jane until Thor 2. Actually, until Thor 3. So, yeah, again, these are not romantic plot tumors. They help advance the plot. You may not like them, but they are not tumors. They could be annoying, but not tumors. But then Avengers Age of Ultron happened. Out of literally nowhere, suddenly Natasha and Bruce are in a sort of weird romantic relationship, despite Bruce having the classic romantic interest in the form of Betty Ross, who, by the way, in the comics would become Betty Banner. And Nat, in the comics, she started as a romantic interest and foil for Tony, a bad girl to Pepper's good girl. And she has had romances with Tony, Steve, Clint, Bucky, and even Peter Parker in the comics. The older Peter Parker, not the younger Peter Parker. Very important distinction. She had never been paired with Bruce because, again, Bruce has this absolute love story with Betty, and the few romantic interests that have appeared in the comics for him that are not Betty are usually for the Hulk, not for Bruce. In Avengers, the movie, Natasha and Bruce barely exchanged words, except for, the scene in which she blackmailed him into going with the Avengers, and the scene where the Hulk tried to, kill her. So when suddenly Natasha is the one who can calm the Hulk, and then she talks to Bruce and apologizes to him because she is unable to have children and thus she's a monster just like him. Not only it comes out of left field and is really misogynistic, it goes against everything both characters are, both in the MCU and in the comics. As I said, it's really misogynistic since it goes back to women only care about romance and having children, and ends up making sure that every female in Avengers until that moment is tied to a romantic interest because, of course, Wanda would fall in love with Vision because their romance was at one point a cornerstone of the Marvel Universe in the comics, and the one single Avenger, the female Avenger, Captain Marvel, would not appear until much later. The so-called romance between Natasha and Bruce, that by the way, is never referenced again, as the one scene where Nat would try to calm the Hulk in Infinity War was deleted, has a weird no homo vibe. Because you see, in Avengers, one of the fanon couples that became incredibly popular to the point that was even brought up to the actors was the one between Tony and Bruce, the Science Bros or the Science Husbands. And while every comic book fan knows that Tony has every single woman in the Marvel Universe, and actually I think that they actually put him out as bisexual in one comic, because Pepper married Happy, as I said, but then she went back to be a romantic interest for him. And in the MCU, he is going to marry Pepper, and Bruce has Betty. Betty has been pretty much unnamed in the movies after the Edward Norton one. So, of course, in order to make sure everyone understood that the Science Bros were only bros and not something else, despite the chemistry and both Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo having the time of their lives in interviews, well, Bruce needed an on-screen girlfriend, and we already had Nat, Wanda, and Clint's wife. A fourth woman in the movie was a bit too much, And well, yes, Clint's wife comes completely out of the blue because she does not exist like that in the comics. His wife was actually an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., and that's a completely different kind of worms. But at least Clint's wife gets to be a plot device for Avengers Endgame. Okay, yes, this no homo theory is a supposition. Josh Whedon, for all his faults, and oh my god, he has faults, may not have intended his big man, small woman fetish, because he has a thing for those pairings, to also look like an homophobic reaction to the popularity of a slash pairing. For something a little bit more clear on that, we also have Steve's weird choices in Endgame. But the truth is, it's there in Age of Ultron. And since there was no follow up later, it feels that, well, the only reason to have Bruce and Nat sort of together was to cut short the science husband's conversations, which of course didn't work, and to get the obligatory Josh Whedon pairing. But at least Nat is not a real person who had a romance shoved in her story for no good reason, right? Right, right. Movies based on a true story are always a mixed bag. While the stories of the people they are based on are quite interesting in their own right, there's always that weird thing when some stuff has to be made more exciting than it really was, and that can end up making everything different. One very good example of this is The Greatest Showman, where not only they make P.T. Barnum into a somewhat nice man who cares for others instead of the abusive conman he really was, they also added a romantic interest from singer Jenny Lind towards Barnum, which never happened in real life. And, well, the whole thing between Philip Carlyle and Ann Wheeler is completely made up because, among other things, Ann Wheeler did not exist. But The Great Showman is a musical. The love of Barnum, or fictional Barnum, for his wife Charity is the main plot. So extra romances are forgiven even if they didn't exist, or again, make a story completely different from the original. This is the complete opposite to Patch Adams. Based on the true story of doctor and professional clown Hunter Doherty Patch Adams, who, among other things, is an activist who believes in alternative health models, which, among other things, avoids insurance policies because he believes medicine should be affordable and kind to all, and not just for those who have the money, is, well, honestly, is a good movie, but that it made the mistake of simplifying Dr. Adams' beliefs to laughter is the best medicine, and Dr. Adams himself as a funny doctor, which was helped a lot by the fact that his role was done by the legendary comedy actor Robin Williams. But that's not the worst part. The worst part was how, in the movie, everything about the founding of the Gesundheit Institute was around how Patch was inspired, well, Dr. Adams was inspired to reach his goal by the death of his girlfriend at the hands of a very troubled mental patient who ended up killing himself too. Never mind that Dr. Adams in the movie already had the seed of the Gesundheit Institute working before the incident. The patient in question was seeing the girlfriend because of the institute itself. The only reason he doesn't kill himself from his grief is due to a butterfly that reminds him of her desire to live, and thus he dedicates himself to get his medicine degree for her. If that sounds like a bit tad too melodramatic for real life, it's because it is. By the time the real Gesundheit Institute started, Dr. Adams already had his medical license, because not having it would have been a crime if he treated patients. But also, the movie girlfriend never existed. Dr. Adams lost a friend to a murder-suicide, and that inspired him more to treat patients with kindness and adding mental health care for all his practice. The said friend was male and not Dr. Adams' romantic partner, and he died long before Dr. Adams was in the position to buy the area that would become the institute, well, the first institute. The woman he met and dated in his final year of med school, Linda Edquist, who helped him found the first Gesundheit Institute, is nowhere to be seen in the movie. And given that she is still alive, was not murdered by a patient, obviously. So everything becomes really weird. I mean, well, not really. since not only we get the dramatic bridging of Karen Fisher, the movie girlfriend, and the romance is completely the trope of serious student who was not amused by the main character jokes, but she learns to love life just before she gets murdered for trying to be like him. She also happens to be a sexual abuse survivor. Because we needed to cram every single cliche in a romance that was not needed to tell the very amazing story of a very amazing real man who is still now working in favor to get medical attention to everyone who needs it without the patients being treated as statistics. Which makes everything worse is that if they really wanted a romance in the movie, Dr. Adams met his real wife in the same time frame as the movie, so there was no need to invent a dead girlfriend except for the extra needed drama that, as any other romantic plot tumor, just get you out of the movie, especially if you already know the true story the movie is supposed to tell, and in this case, makes a grave disservice to Dr. Adams, his wife, and the friend who died. And if you don't know the true story and thus at first watch you actually like the extra romance, it ruins future rewatches because once you learn the truth, it feels empty. So, in short, we should have more movies without romance. Not every movie needs a romance, not every hero needs to have a significant other, because asexual and aromantic people exist, and they can be as heroic as any allosexual or alloromantic person can be. Of course, we also need more gay and lesbian and bi romances, but that's a subject for a different video. And even if the hero has a significant other, the story is not about the relationship. The movie should focus more on the actual subject of the plot and not on whatever romantic trope the writer or the executives like that week. Now, I want to thank, as always, my dear patrons, Mitch Hyman, Elaine Ho, and Jessic for their continued support, as well as my first supporter, Tanya Pineda. I also want to remind you that if you want to support these and my other projects and get your name mentioned here, you can do so at my Patreon, which is linked in my link tree, which is on the description, because, well, I realized that I have a lot of social media, so a link tree was necessary. But if you joined my Patreons with just $1 a month, you will always be thanked in my videos and get access to a lot of art before anything else, and also the videos 24 hours before. If you can't support me this way, I will totally understand, but also accept likes, subscriptions to the channel, comments so that the algorithm catches engagement, and of course, you sharing the links. I also welcome all your questions, comments, and suggestions in the comments below. So, thank you for now, and I'll see you next time so we can talk about something else. Bye-bye!